Mm, one of my all-time favorite vibes, Brooklyn's own Tribe Called Quest. Yo, Atan Thomas, please tell our audience who our next guest is.
Yes, as I said before, I am a big fan of his. I've been following him for a while, so it's definitely an honor to get him on the show. He is a human rights lawyer, an author, Sirius XM host, creator of Let's Address This, and the 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 thing that I really respect about him is the way that he goes more in depth and challenges the coverage of the media on very important topics, like Palestine, like Bill Maher making light of his Islamophobia, whether it's Mamdani. He goes more in depth, and I have so much respect to him, Mr. Qasim Rashid. How are you doing, sir?
I'm good, brother. It's great to be here. I'm a huge NBA fan, so it's great to connect with you on multiple levels, and excited to have this conversation. Obviously, David, Chuck, followed your work for a while too, so great to connect with all three of you guys.
Fantastic.
Wow.
Let me give the first question here.
Yeah.
We're following everything with Mandami. It's a huge election,
Hmm.
and the thing that really maybe it shouldn't have surprised me, but it did surprise me was the level of ignorance and hatred and Islamophobia that started pouring, not just from the usual suspects but from people on the left,
Yeah.
from the Democrats, and I was like, wow, like y'all are. I know I probably shouldn't have been as surprised as I was, but talk about that with our listeners, please.
Yeah, it actually it doesn't surprise me at all, Itan. It to me it would have been shocking if there was solidarity in any political party. Anti-Muslim hate, Islamophobia hasn't just been a tolerated form of bigotry, it's been a celebrated form of bigotry. It's a flex that look, I'm so, conservative that I can, wage this war against these radical Islamics. And on the left, it's, I'm so liberal that do you see how they treat women over there? And I support women's rights, so therefore I'm going to be anti-Muslim as well. I mean, it's just such an ass backwards philosophy. And I always point out to folks that really there's two things I think about here. One, I look internally. I talk to my fellow American Muslims and say, look, we can complain and whine and be justified in the hatred we're getting, but ultimately we got to step up and we got to write our narrative and we got to be out front driving the narrative. Because if we don't drive our own narrative based on facts and our lived experiences, people with ulterior motives are going to do it for us, and it's not going to be a good look for us. So it's
Mm.
one thing to call it out, but we also need to be out front. And that's why I'm unapologetic across all my platforms to say, hey, here are the things I care about. And yes, I am an observant Muslim. I'm not going to hide the fact that I'm a Muslim. I'm not going to sugarcoat that. And that's what I loved. You probably saw Zohran Mamdani's comments a couple of days ago, where he talked about how, a well-meaning uncle kind of pulled him aside and said, "Listen, son, just you should run, but just you don't need to actually be very Muslim about it."
Mhm.
And how he even thought that maybe if I just double down on compassion and justice, people will look past the faith. And I loved how he closed it by saying that I was wrong and I'm going to step out into the light, and every person should feel free and comfortable stepping out into the light. And so that's one side of it. The other side of it is the level of bigotry. And I've run for Congress twice. I ran once 6 years ago and once 2 years ago. First time I ran against a Republican, a staunch right-wing MAGA nut job. Second time I ran in a deep blue district against somebody who's considered, a strong Democrat. And I'll tell you guys, the level of hate and bigotry I received from both was basically the same thing.
Wow.
And
Well,
and
that's
and,
that's
and the equity of the
terrible.
overall party was basically the same thing on the Democratic side too. That's a
That's
reality.
terrible. But then what can we learn? What lessons can we draw from the fact that the most important city on earth, yes, I was born and raised in New York, but the most important city on earth looks poised to elect a Muslim mayor. I mean, this is a city that as recently as what, a decade and a half ago, they had people marching in the streets to keep an Islamic YMCA from opening up within walking distance of the holy ground of the World Trade Center. Meanwhile, there are like 75 porn shops between where that was. But I mean, what does that tell us about 2025? That such a thing is about to happen.
I think it tells us that there's a massive detachment from the elites in power and working Americans. And this is why I remain maybe even hopelessly optimistic that I don't lose faith in my neighbors. I've sat down with the most right-wing MAGA folks, and we found ways to break bread together and come to an understanding where we may not agree on everything, but we agree on, to me, the most important thing, and that is the humanity of one another. And so I think what Zohran Mamdani did is he met people where they are. And I talked to his team, and they pointed out that after the 2024 election, this man looked at the charts on where people voted right wing, or like where they shifted right most in New York City, and he went and knocked on those doors and said, "Hey, look, I'm not here to change your mind. I just want to understand, why did you vote Trump instead of Harris this time? Like, what made you vote Republican instead of Democrat? Like, what's bothering you?" And then his whole formula of free buses, of free childcare, of city-owned grocery stores, of a 2% tax on millionaires. This came from those conversations. And so when you have these elitists attacking him as a communist and a socialist, what they're doing is they're attacking the people who left the Democratic Party because the party wasn't fighting for them. So all they're doing by attacking him is validating for those voters that, yeah, we're voting for the right guy, because the same people who screwed us over and failed us for all this time are now trying to do the same damn thing all over again. And so I think, David, to answer your question really simply, is that people recognize the humanity of Zohran because he's earned it. And there's a huge just disconnect from the Chuck Schumers and the Hakeem Jeffries of the world, and the Cory Bookers and the Kirsten Gillibrands, and the ordinary voters who are like, enough of this crap. We need someone who's going to actually fight for our economic basic humanity. Otherwise, what the hell's the point? Why put a pride flag or a Black Lives Matter logo if you're still going to bomb the crap out of genocide, out of Gaza for genocide? You're still going to give tax breaks to billionaires. You're still going to deny us universal health care. You're not going to protect Roe. You're not going to protect, the Equality Act. What the hell's the point? And I think people are just fed up by it.
I mean, I think it's interesting. Yeah. And I will go to you, Chuck, but I just to add to what you're saying, you said he listened to the people and he asked them what they want. And one of the biggest things that you hear New Yorkers talk about is affordable housing. So, New York, there's the difficulty. It's like expensive to be poor in New York right now. And so he made that at the top of the list of one of his platforms. And I'm like, well, why would you be against it? Why would there be? And we talked about earlier, we talked about Trump, this before this segment, and we talked about the people in my hometown, Tulsa, Oklahoma, who are below the poverty line, bottom of education, everything like that, but still supported Trump. And I said that, racism is such a powerful drug that you would vote against your own interests. And going towards seeing everything that's happening in New York, he is speaking to what the people want, right? He's speaking to what the people want. Right. It was still so difficult for so many Democrats to still support him, even though he's literally speaking to it, and that it befuddled me. I can say that. It befuddled me.
Yeah, well said. Well said. Yeah.
And I would, Qasim, great to have you on the show. I would add about that disconnect you spoke about. That includes Jews. Half of New York City Jews, according to polls, support Mamdani. But if I turned on CNN, I would not know that at all. As an anti-Zionist Jew, I'm proud of that. It should be higher if the other Jews had all the facts and didn't have to deal with the propaganda. But I wanted to ask you something. Years ago, I came across you. I'd written an article in New York Daily News on basically 5 reasons that liberals should boycott Bill Maher. And we had some interaction. And at that time, it was, why doesn't Bill Maher have Muslims on the show to challenge him? If you're so open-minded and want to have everyone and platform white supremacists, why don't you have a Muslim? And I know you were actually saying, Bill Maher, invite me on. Let me go on the show. And since that time, I don't see Muslims advocating for themselves. I don't see Palestinians advocating for themselves. I don't even see anti-Zionist Jews advocating for themselves. In this media environment, what do we do? How do we deal with that dynamic when you can't even get in these spaces to advocate for yourself?
Well, Chuck, it's a beautiful question. I remember that exchange we had years ago, and I've been following and admiring your work ever since then. Look, this goes back to my earlier comment that we can whine and complain and be right about it, but we ultimately need to build our own platforms. We need to build our own. I tell the story. I'm not going to name the person because I don't want to judge people based on their worst moments. But I remember when I had a really tiny platform, maybe like 4 or 5,000 followers. And I asked somebody who had like 50,000 followers at the time, which seemed astronomical, to boost some content for me. And they gave me the snarky response, like, "Hey, fine, I'll do it, but stop begging me for this stuff." And it was just this really salty feeling. And after they boosted it, I deleted the tweet because I'm like, I don't need charity from people who are gonna, then spit on me afterwards. And I promised myself that I'm never gonna beg anybody for a platform. I'm gonna build my own. And now I've got a platform that, it's about 2 million followers across social media, and I'm gonna continue to build it. And I love boosting other folks, like, especially young and up and coming people who are trying to build out. I love to do it. And that's my point, right? That it's taken me a decade to build this, and I'm going to keep building it. And pretty soon I'll be at 20 million and maybe 100 million. Who knows? But my point is that when folks are trying to block us out of these conversations, I'm not going to bang my head against the wall and say, "Let me in to what you built." I'm going to build my own and make it better and make it bolder. And I also want to add to your other point, Chuck, about anti-Zionist Jews, but just Jewish people in general. This is such an excellent point. I tweeted this out a couple of days ago, or posted it, whatever the right terminology is anymore, that, Zohran Mamdani has a plurality of the Jewish vote.
Mm-hmm.
And every time a journalist calls him anti-Semitic, that journalist, or every time a politician calls him anti-Semitic, they should be asked, do you think Jewish people are stupid?
Mm-hmm.
Do you really think that you, as somebody living in Washington, D.C., for example, knows better about New York City than a Jewish person living in New York City about anti-Semitism? Why are you calling the majority of Jewish people? Either you're yourself ignorant, in which case you shouldn't be asking this question, or you think that Jewish people aren't intelligent, in which case you should look at your own anti-Semitism. But it's just mind-boggling to me that the facts tell us that Jewish people have studied this man. You've got Brad Lander, the highest-ranking Jewish official in New York City. You've got who's the congressman, Jerry Nadler, who has the most diverse and largest Jewish congregation, endorsing him proudly. And you have the audacity to say, well, this man is anti-Semitic because he thinks that Israel shouldn't commit genocide. I mean, give me a break. And so that's where people like Maher aren't going to grapple with those conversations. One, because he knows Maher is very smart. He's very smart in that he knows where the holes in his arguments are. And so the only people he's going to bring on are the people who don't know where those holes are. The rest of us who are actual academics on a particular issue are going to tear him apart. I mean, it should, for every person watching this or listening to this, you should think about the fact that after Ben Affleck tore him apart, he didn't dare have anyone on who could actually challenge him. But if Ben Affleck, and I love Ben Affleck, don't get me wrong, but if Ben Affleck is the academic and scholar that you're bringing on to challenge you, I'm sorry, you're not an intellectual, you're a propagandist.
Next to Sam Harris, no less.
Yes. My God, don't get me started on Sam Harris. He's
God,
Bill
we can have a
Maher
whole
on
show on
steroids.
it.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. I don't think Ben Affleck has been a return guest since then, which is kind of funny to me.
I know.
Because if you can have, most people would want a movie star on their show, but it's like, not a movie star who's smarter than me. No way. We're not doing that. But it does raise this. I mean, not to keep going back to Mamdani, but I think for so many people of our collective political ilk, it actually is a symbol of hope, more because it shows that if you put out something that's bold and inviting and challenging and doesn't kowtow to the same special interests and the same Zionist interests, that you can actually build an electoral coalition that can win in a city like New York. And it's a path to victory, which I think so many people have been straining for, instead of like the paths to defeat that we've been seeing from the Democratic Party, that they've been clinging to proudly. Like, sure, we'll lose an election if it means we don't have to criticize Israel. We'll get handed to Donald Trump. Sure, we'll do. Like, to have people say, no, we're going to fight is a huge deal. I'm going to ask you a question, and I think I know your answer. So I guess it's less of a yes/no question than hoping you can explicate it on it a little bit.
Sure.
But I am of the belief that a Democratic Party politician on a national basis cannot win unless they're on the right side of the issue of Israel-Palestine.
Completely agree.
Okay.
Completely agree. Yeah, I completely agree. Look, and and the data already shows us this. And I was screaming, and look, I voted for Harris. I campaigned for Harris. I knocked doors for her in in Georgia and in Michigan. Um, Not because I thought that she was a perfect candidate. I don't think anybody thought that, but because I knew Donald Trump would exacerbate genocide, expand it, and now this sociopath wants to test nuclear weapons. So we all knew this. And one of the things that I said to Harris's camp directly, I was at the DNC, I was protesting outside, trying to get a Palestinian speaker on. I made two comments to them. I said, one, you can't say that the Palestinian issue is so irrelevant that we're not going to have a speaker, but then center Israeli speakers on there. It is a contradiction in terms. You need to have both or neither. You can't have one because it's insincere and it's unjust. And credit to the Jewish family that spoke, the Israeli family that spoke, they humanize Palestinians more than any of the Democratic politicians. So I give them all the credit and love in the world. And obviously my condolences for the horrific, loss of life that they suffered in their family. But the second point I made was you're not going to win an election by going against the majority of your base. 77% of Democrats said stop funding Netanyahu. 30 polls across the country in swing states and national polls all showed anywhere from a 6 to 10 point bump for Harris if she simply said, I'm going to break with Biden on this. We got to uphold our Leahy laws. We need to uphold international human rights law. I'm going to stop funding Netanyahu until we can figure out what the hell is going on. That's all she had to say. And she didn't. Now that number, by the way, is 92% of Democrats want the Democratic Party to stop funding Netanyahu. You are not going to win a primary unless you are on the right side of this issue, because now people are pissed off, they're emboldened. And by the way, the post 24 election polling showed that the number two issue, 24% of why people stayed home, was the economy. The number one issue, 29%, was Palestine. So for all the people claiming that this was just a non-issue and you're doing you're shooting our own, no, I'm sorry. And I'll close with this point, David, that let's take any other issue. Let's leave Gaza and Palestine and Israel aside for a second. Let's take abortion. 92% of let's assume 92% of Democrats want to protect abortion access. I think it's like 95%, but let's say 92%. Let's talk about LGBTQ equality. Let's talk about affirmative action. These issues that we all care about for all the right reasons. Could you imagine a prospective, candidate Newsom or candidate Harris saying, you know what, abortion is not that important. I'm going to have to side with the Republicans on this one. They would be laughed out of the Democratic primary. And the difference here is that the people, the Democratic Party-based voters, which lead with Black women, Black men, and then, of course, everyone else following their lead, are telling you, this is a non-negotiable for us. Stop funding this genocide. And the only people who don't seem to get it are the AIPAC-funded elites in power who don't realize that they're way past their expiration date. I think they're going to find out the hard way in this next primary coming up, assuming we even have one anymore.
Wow.
Yeah, there's an important last rejoinder to that. I mean, the idea that we have chosen to follow Israel off a cliff into fascism will be one of those things that historians muse about for decades to come. We're running low on time. Any last questions from any of our folk, Atan or Chuck, for our amazing guest?
Just tell everybody where they can follow you. I said it before, you're a great follow, and I appreciate all of the work that you do, and it's really important. But let everybody know where they can follow you and read your work.
I appreciate all three of you guys. I'm at QasimRashid.com, just my name, and I'm at Qasim Rashid across all platforms, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, you name it. And my Substack is Let's Address This with Qasim Rashid. You can just type in my website. It'll take you right there. My content never has a paywall. You can be a paid subscriber if you want, but I never have a paywall. So join us, engage, help us build this platform, and let's kick fascism's ass.
It's a platform that clearly needs to be built. Qasim Rashid, thank you so much for joining us here on The Collision.
Thanks, guys. Peace out.
Fascism's ass. Let's do it. That's a close.
Well, this has been a heck of a show. I'm just going to say out there to folks before we go that there will be and this will be all I'm going to say about it, is that there is going to be a live episode of The Collision with two sports writing legends. Their names, and I know you know them, are David Aldridge and Kevin Blackistone. We're going to have someone we discussed during the show this week, Dr. Angel Jones. Her heroic work standing up to the Charlie Kirk Furies will be one of the topics of discussion. There will also be two youth poets there of tremendous note, and that is going to be at 6:30 p.m. on Tuesday, November 4th, and it's going to be at the Tacoma Busboys and Poets, 235 Carroll Street Northwest, 1 block away from the Red Line Tacoma Metro. And Coach Kevin McNutt will be in the audience.
Oh, he's
Just
coming.
so folks know.
That's cool.
Very excited.
Yes.
And so for all the folks out there who've said to me, I really want to meet Coach McNutt, but I don't want to see you. You can come by, shake Coach's hand, and be about your business. 6:30 p.m. Tacoma Busboys live collision. Well, that's all the time we have this week. Any last words for you, Chuck?
Yes, I got to slip this in. Saturday, November 1st, Paul Robeson Peace and Justice Awards Gala at the Festival Center, 1640 Columbia Road. 2 independent journalists who I love will be getting awards, Shedrick Pelt and Reverend Bill Lee. They're out there with the cameras. They don't have necessarily the big social media presence, but they're doing it. And I'm going to be there, and love to those 2 in particular.
And Natan, any last words from you, sir?
Yes, please keep Jamaica in your prayers. There's a horrific hurricane that happened. I'm trying to put together actively right now a fundraiser for the people of Jamaica. You just go look up online. That's the entire towns have been decimated. It's really a terrible scene there. So please keep them in your prayers and be on the lookout for a fundraiser I'm going to be doing for the people of Jamaica.
Big time times 100. Shout out to my man Brian Tierney, who's holding it down right now in Jamaica with his family. Yo, for everybody out there listening, thank you for joining us here on The Collision. Please stay frosty. We are out of here. Peace.